Thank you for tuning into Short Fiction Lab. You're listening to Transmigrated into a novel. The rich lady has no time to save the gloomy male supporting lead. The system showed me an unlimited black card, pointing toward the male supporting lead, who was standing in the rain, soaked like a drowned rat. The male and female leads are already together, it said. Only the lovesick male supporting lead is left, loving but never getting what he wants, sinking into the mud with no one to spare him a glance. Your mission is to use money to help him rise again, to save his gloomy life. The system rambled on with spit practically flying and spoiled the entire plot for me. After the male supporting lead climbed to the top, he'd resent me for the way I had trampled on his pride when he was down because I used money to help him. Then he'd take revenge on me in the cruelest way. Only after I died would he regret it, admit he'd loved me all along, drink himself senseless, and kneel by my grave crying like a tragic hero. After hearing that dark, over-the-top script, I was so moved that I almost teared up. Before the system could react, I yoinked the black card from its hand, slammed the gas, and zoomed past the depressed male supporting lead, drenching him in rainwater. After that, I sped straight to the nearest mall and swiped the card. 13 luxury handbags, plus 8 heavy gold bracelets, and a few jade bangles clinking like wind chimes, stuffed into the trunk until it was full. I'd been poor for 24 years. Suddenly I transmigrated into a rich girl. Compared to the male supporting lead, I was the one who needed this black card to save my life. The trunk was packed tight. I wiped sweat and slammed it shut, hiding my entire haul. The system screamed, panicking, "Host! You came here to save the male supporting lead. If you don't complete the mission, you'll be punished." I calmly lay down under the front wheel. "Didn't you say I'd be erased? Stop talking. Get in, start the car and run me over." The system screamed itself hoarse. "Even worse than death. If you don't finish the mission, you'll be stuck in this world forever." The air froze. I sprang out from under the car. The gold bracelets on my wrist jingled brightly. I trembled with excitement. "You mean the punishment for not doing the mission is staying here forever as the daughter of the richest family in the city? Waking up every day with more money than I can spend? Luxury stores treating me like a VIP and I can buy as many bags as I want?" The system choked. Then it switched tactics, soft and coaxing. "Host, think about your parents. If you don't go back, how will they live?" I patted my chest confidently. "That you don't need to worry about. I personally turned the gas valve and lit the flame, sent everybody off in one go. Before transmigrating, they tried to marry me off to a 50-year-old man to get 380,000 yuans in bride price for my younger brother's wedding. We fought like thunder and earthquakes. In the end, I dragged the whole family down with me." The system struggled one last time. "Then, what was your name before you transmigrated?" "Shu Zhao Di. It means to welcome a little brother. My parents wanted a son, not a daughter." The world fell silent. Satisfied, I drove my loot home. On the way, I ran into the male supporting lead, Shen Renke, shivering under an awning, pale, calling someone on the phone again and again. I glanced at the phone on the passenger seat. The screen lit up and went dark repeatedly. The last call ended by itself. The screen stopped on WeChat, rows of green messages, and below them, transfer records marked received. His final message from earlier that day was crystal clear. "Stop using money to trample my pride. What you're doing only disgusts me." I had never considered having money thrown at you a humiliation. Before I transmigrated, I got into college. My parents pointed at my face and cursed. "What's the use of a girl studying? Go work, earn money for the family. When you're old enough, get married in exchange for bride price. That's all you're good for." I packed and left, 2 vicious faces behind me. Tuition was student loans. My pocket had not a single cent. Luckily, my dorm had a hot-tempered rich girl. Her rhinestone nail set cost more than my monthly allowance. I became her errand runner, fetching water, buying food. Even when she tossed me clothes and cosmetics she didn't want, I accepted happily. People mocked me, said I had no backbone like a dog selling its pride for money. But my math was clear. One errand paid 100 yuans. Picking up deliveries, at least 50. Her outdated clothes were all designer, soft, smooth, nothing like the worn rags in my closet. When you've never been full and someone hands you a bowl of plain porridge, your first reaction is to be grateful and gulp it down, not stare at a few grains of sand and scream the porridge is dirty. Because of her, my 4 years of college went smoothly, and I saved a few tens of thousands. Shen Renke was different. Every time I transferred money, he'd accept it silently, then bristle like a hedgehog and howl about his wounded dignity. He couldn't bear to refuse money, yet he wanted people to kneel and offer it with both hands, living off others while acting noble. Rain kept pounding. I carried my luxury bags into the mansion. Gift boxes sat in the living room, low-key but extravagant. Up close you could smell faint leather. The smell of money was comforting. The system couldn't stand it anymore. "Host, have some pity. He's depressed because he can't have the one he loves." I flopped on the floor, exhausted. I was poor for 24 years. My illness is worse than his. If you keep yapping tonight, I'm upgrading from depressed to going completely insane. The system shut up immediately. Mrs. Liu came out of the kitchen, looked behind me and didn't see Shen Renke. Her face darkened. "Miss Shu, weren't you driving to pick up young Master Shen? It's raining so hard, why are you back alone? What will young Master Shen do?" The blame on her face was obvious, as if he were the owner of this mansion and I were just a guest. Shen Renke was a famously poor but proud campus heartthrob, a gloomy, handsome face, paired with a striped shirt washed so many times it had faded nearly white. Standing beneath dappled sunlight filtering through the trees, he was enough to leave me completely dazzled. Back in school, class differences weren't all that obvious, but once you stepped into society, everyone was shoved right back into their proper lane. He had no background, no connections, so everywhere he went he hit walls. His career went nowhere. And the female lead he secretly loved grew closer and closer to the male lead, which only crushed him further, until he looked like a walking corpse. I brought him back to the villa and gave him the best guest room on the second floor. By now, Shen Renke had lived here for over a year. During that time, he was gentle and pleasant to everyone in the house, exceptionally kind. Once, Mrs. Liu accidentally broke an expensive porcelain set. According to the contract, I suggested deducting her wages to cover the loss. Shen Renke, standing nearby, said calmly, "If you can forgive someone, then forgive them. It's just a few porcelain bowls. Do you really need to threaten people like this? When will you stop using money to humiliate others?" That single sentence nailed me to a pillar of shame, like I truly was some vicious rich heiress, sins piled sky high. He gave warmth and kindness to everyone else, while dumping all his coldness and distance squarely on me. The system was honestly ridiculous. It told me to save a man who had merely tripped on the road of stubborn, unrequited love. Compared to him, wasn't I, covered in 1,000 wounds, the one who needed saving more? "Young Master Shen?" I sneered. "Since when did this house acquire a young master? Mrs. Liu, who's paying your salary right now? Don't tell me you still haven't figured that out." Her expression froze. Just then, the mansion door opened. Shen Renke walked in drenched, and behind him was a fragile, pale girl. The female lead. He actually dared to bring her into my home. The system chirped enthusiastically. The male and female leads had a fight, and the lovesick male supporting lead thought his chance had come, and he hurriedly brought her home. Back in school, the romance between the male and female leads was loud and dramatic, so over the top that outsiders jokingly called them the most domineering romantic CEO and the pure white flower from the slums. But once they stepped into society, the script completely changed. She turned into a gold digger eager to marry up, while he became a cold, rational CEO looking for a virtuous stay-at-home wife to inherit the family business. Their love couldn't withstand even the slightest storm. The one on top refused to lower himself. The one below desperately wanted to climb up and sit as an equal. After one argument, the female lead stormed off and went straight to her Michelin spare tyre, the male supporting lead, Shen Renke. Shen Renke was openly thrilled. He thought his sincere devotion had finally seen the light of day. Without hesitation, he rushed into the pouring rain, determined to bring the female lead home. And me. Worried about him, I would have humbly driven out to pick up both the male supporting lead and the female lead, like an absolute fool. Shen Renke frowned at me. Shu Han Yu, why didn't you answer your phone? I waited forever and you never came. Yan Yan almost caught a cold. So my new name was Shu Han Yu, jade in the palm, 100 times better than Zhao Di. Mrs. Liu looked full of worry. She hurried over with 2 towels and then turned to join in the scolding. Exactly, Miss Chu. Why did you come back by yourself? And why did you buy so many things so recklessly? When Shen Renki saw the designer bag scattered all over the floor, his expression darkened instantly. Shu Han Yu, stop acting like a spoiled princess all the time. So what if you have money? Does that make you amazing? Who are you showing off to by throwing money around like this? Why don't you fix this bad habit of yours already? Every time I spent money, Shen Renke would immediately turn cold and bark a few harsh words as if I were spending his money. To get closer to him, and more importantly, to protect his fragile, easily shattered ego, I had gone a long time without buying new clothes or eating at high-end restaurants. Even so, Shen Renke still often wore a dark expression, unhappy with what he called my extravagant spending. I stared at him. I'm spending my own money. What does it have to do with you? Or have you lived here too long and forgotten whose nest this is? Shen Renke's face suddenly went deathly pale. That sentence was viciously sharp. It dug out his already wavering pride, threw it to the ground and ground it underfoot. In the past, I would have worried about preserving his dignity. Every word I spoke had to be rehearsed in my head again and again, afraid I might offend him. His pride was both sensitive and fragile, something that had to be handled with extreme care and constantly nourished with large amounts of money. Mrs. Liu tried to defend him. I waved her off. Mrs. Liu, you're fired. Pack up and get out. And the porcelain you broke, deduct it from your pay this month. Mrs. Liu shrieked. Miss Chu, on what grounds? I didn't do anything wrong. Shen Renke pinched his brow, dissatisfied. You've never been poor, so you don't know how ugly it looks when you use money to force people. He was wrong. I had been poor. Poor enough to not afford a pen. Poor enough to dig in trash for food. To stuff a dried bun someone threw away into my mouth, grinding my teeth through high school. When the rich dorm girl first tossed me 100 wen for errands, I turned that red bill over and over, so excited I didn't sleep all night. But I knew poverty does not turn a person into someone like him, taking someone's money, then turning around to spit in their face. Fine. I looked him dead in the eye. Mrs. Liu can stay. From now on, her salary is paid by Mr. Shen. Everything he wanted to say died in his throat. He never wanted to spend. All the money I transferred, he used it either on himself or on the female lead. I never got a single gift from him. Mrs. Liu was dragged away by my butler, still wailing loudly, crying that she was wrong and begging for another chance. Standing behind them, Chao Yan bit her lip. She first swept an envious glance over the pile of luxury handbags scattered across the floor, then reached out and tugged gently at Shen Renke's sleeve. With an anxious, innocent expression, she said, Renke, Han Yu is just jealous because you brought me home. Maybe I should leave. She hunched her shoulders, looking lost and despondent, and turned as if to go, only for Shen Renke to grab her wrist. It's so late, and it's pouring outside. Don't run around. What if you catch a fever? He said softly. Stay here tonight. I'll take you upstairs to shower first. After saying that, he actually walked straight past me, clearly intending to lead Chao Yan upstairs. Shen Renke had always stayed in the largest guest bedroom on the south side of the second floor, a room fully equipped with the latest amenities and cleaned daily by the staff. I stopped him. Wait. Shen Renke turned back, impatience written all over his face. Shu Han Yu, I suggest you know when to stop. I don't have time to waste arguing with you. The one I've always liked is Yan Yan. As for you, I've only ever thought of you as an older sister. I was 1 month older than him. Technically, he wasn't wrong. The system cut in at just the right moment. Host, just treat him like your own younger brother and save him a little. That way it'll be easier for me to complete the mission. Oh, right. What does your biological younger brother usually say to you the most? What was it again? In a daze, I seemed to see Xu Guangtong viciously grabbing my hair, his bloated face magnified endlessly before my eyes. I mimicked his tone as I spoke. Other people's sisters get married to earn bride price for their brothers. Why won't you agree to marry? If you don't get married, where am I supposed to get money to buy a house, buy a car and marry a wife? Today I'll beat you to death." The system fell silent. My eyes turned red. Shenrenke's face overlapped with that brother's. Hatred flooded me. I grabbed the vase beside me and hurled it at him with all my strength, just slightly off target. Along with Chao Yan's piercing scream, the vase shattered at his feet, shards exploding across the floor. Shenrenke staggered back in shock. Once he recovered, he immediately pulled Chao Yan behind him, his expression fierce. "Have you lost your mind? Apologize to Yan Yan right now, or I'll move out of your villa tonight." I laughed, delighted, and pointed at the open door. "Perfect. Then get out, now. And don't forget to return a full year's rent along with every cent you've ever taken, clean and complete." Outside, rain poured down in sheets. Under the rolling thunder, Shenrenke's face flickered between light and shadow, his hands clenched into fists. The hatred on his face toward me was completely undisguised. But what exactly did he hate me for? For giving him money? For helping him start his career? For willingly using my connections to pave his way? Even raising a dog would have been more worthwhile. After a long moment, I heard Shenrenke hiss through clenched teeth. "Shu Han Yu, you'd better be clear about this. If I walk out that door today, I will never come back. That cheap trick of soft coercion has never worked on me." I replied slowly. "So what? Do you really think I'd still be hoping a parasite like you would come back?" All the colour drained from his face. I had never spoken to him so harshly before. Chao Yan couldn't hold back anymore and spoke up indignantly on his behalf. "Shu Han Yu, how can you humiliate someone like this just because you have money? Renke will definitely succeed. He's not inferior to anyone." In the original plot, Shenrenke was of course destined to succeed. In the book, I poured everything I had into supporting his startup, even pulling out connections built over 3 generations to clear the way for him. With the road paved that smoothly, it was only natural for him to move forward without obstacles and effortlessly make tens of billions. But now there was no help from me. Shenrenke was dirt poor, left with nothing but his stubborn pride. And as for Chao Yan, so determined to marry into wealth, would she really be willing to keep clinging to a penniless spare tire like him? Shenrenke took Chao Yan's hand and led her out of the villa, walking deliberately slowly, as if waiting for someone to lower themselves and call out to stop him. It wasn't until the 2 of them were standing outside that the iron gate behind them slammed shut with a loud bang. Still lost in the belief that I would regret it, Shenrenke was jolted awake by this opposite reality. A look of confusion surfaced on his face as he stood outside the gate, momentarily at a loss. The system cautiously studied my bloodshot eyes and tentatively tried to negotiate. "Why don't you invite a psychologist to take a look? Right now you seem even more gloomy than the lovesick male supporting lead." The psychologist sat across from me, holding the stack of completed questionnaires in his hands. Following procedure, he asked, "Miss Shu, what do you think is the main reason you lose control of your emotions?" Leaning back in my chair, expressionless, I spat out a single word. Poverty. The moment the word landed, the 8 large gold bracelets on my wrist made his eyes blur. The psychologist stared, mouth hanging open. After fumbling for a while, he forced himself to continue. "Do you experience any obsessive or compulsive behaviours in daily life?" I thought carefully for a moment. "Only when I buy lots of things and stuff them into my room do I feel safe. Only then do I stop worrying about whether I'll eat today but not tomorrow. Sometimes I feel like a hamster, desperately hoarding supplies, desperately cramming food into my stomach." The psychologist took off his glasses and rubbed his eyes, making a visible effort to avoid looking at the 8 gold bangles. Then he scratched at the top of his thinning head and offered a conclusion that even he seemed reluctant to believe. "Based on the assessment results, you've lived for a long time under oppressive conditions and chronic hunger, which has caused significant psychological stress. I recommend that you follow your instincts. Buying and stockpiling some household items may help reduce your anxiety." My phone chimed. When I checked it, it was a message from my best friend, Li Lan. "Han Yu, the piece of land you were keeping an eye on for that Shen guy is going up for auction tomorrow. Let's meet at the auction." That land would be worth a lot more in the future. I found myself thinking, if I bought it, wouldn't the extra money I made mean I could donate a few more elementary schools, help children who'd dropped out return to class? That warm vision of the future seemed to pull me back to a time before I'd become so hardened. Back when I still longed for family warmth, when I once imagined a life where I wouldn't have to worry about food and clothing. A future with none of the screaming and dragging that came with turning the gas valve at the end. I replied immediately, "All right, I'll definitely be there tomorrow." The auction hall bustled with people coming and going. I linked arms with Li Lan and ate 4 slices of cake in a row. She looked at me with open disdain. "Don't you usually scream about losing weight? Why's your appetite so good today?" A second later, she tugged on my arm and shook it playfully. "But honestly, I like you better with a bit more weight. You're so skinny right now. One gust of wind and you'd fall over. Hugging you hurts my arms." I forced a small smile. It wasn't that my appetite was good, I just lived in hunger for too long. When someone grows up worrying that there won't be another meal after this one, a habit forms. Whenever there's food, it gets stuffed into the mouth without hesitation. Li Lan absent-mindedly turned her head, then froze as if she'd discovered a new continent. She pointed behind me and shouted, "Hey, isn't that Shen, the campus heartthrob you were always into? Why is he here with another woman?" I turned around and saw Shen Renki walking into the auction hall, Chao Yan at his side. I asked the system, "Don't you need proof of assets to get in here? How did he manage that? Did he rob a bank overnight and suddenly strike it rich?" "Host, you once gave him an invitation. He entered under the pretense of being your boyfriend." Shen Renki was still wearing the same clothes from yesterday, the ones he'd been kicked out in. They had been hastily washed but never properly ironed, deep creases still visible everywhere, an unmistakable sign of his financial hardship. He stared at me for a long time. The resentment and impatience on his face slowly gathered at the corners of his mouth, eventually curving into a smile full of implication, as though everything were already firmly in his grasp. He probably assumed I'd shown up here because of him. After all, I'd mentioned this piece of land to him in private more than once, repeatedly assuring him that I planned to give it to him as a birthday gift for his 24th birthday, to help his career soar. By the time the land went up for bidding, the look on Shen Renke's face had grown even more arrogant and self-assured, calm and calculated, as though victory were already guaranteed. After several rounds of bidding, I nearly emptied my entire account, spending 300 million yuan to secure the development rights to this undeveloped plot. The auction host enthusiastically presented the contract. "Miss Chu, congratulations on successfully acquiring the development rights. Once the contract is signed, this land will be your private property." Just as I was about to step forward, Shen Renke leisurely adjusted his clothes and stood up. Under the gaze of the crowd, the dignity he'd lost seemed to be completely restored in that moment. Wearing a trace of arrogance, he said to me, "Han Yu, since you bought this land for me, I'll forgive your reckless behaviour last night. As long as you apologise to Yan Yan, I can move back into the villa tonight." 300 million yuan, and he accepted it as though it were a favour bestowed upon me. There wasn't even a hint of gratitude on his face, only excitement and entitlement. What Shen Renki didn't realise was that beneath this familiar exterior, the soul inside had already been replaced. He would soon discover that prying money out of me was harder than pulling teeth. I remained seated, leisurely sizing Shen Renke up from head to toe, smiling without warmth. "Who said this land was bought for you?" For a brief moment, Shen Renke froze. I sneered. "Someone like you thinks he's worthy of a 300 million yuan plot of land. What, do you have gold growing under you or something?" Soft laughter rippled through the auction hall. Li Lan grabbed my sleeve, eyes brimming with tears of excitement. "Xiao Yu, you've been blind for 5 years. Today you're finally cured. You won't relapse again, right?" Standing under the lights, Shen Renke looked like a clown under scrutiny, his pride smashed to pieces. He stared at me intensely, like we just met for the first time. How ironic. We had indeed only known each other for a single day. The system told me to come save him. Clearly it had picked the wrong person. Someone as gloomy as me could barely save herself. Where would the extra energy come from to rescue a lovesick male supporting lead who thought too highly of himself? The whispers in the auction hall drifted clearly into Shen Renke's ears. Nothing more than talk of freeloaders, kept men, living off women. Qiao Yan couldn't hold back and stood up to challenge me. Shu Han Yu, why won't you give Renke that land? I narrowed my eyes, finding it absurd. If you feel so strongly, why don't you take out 300 million yourself and help him? Qiao Yan was left speechless. It seemed that as long as the male supporting lead was gloomy and stubborn enough, the whole world felt obliged to protect him unconditionally. I was gloomy too, harsh, bitter, crawling through the mud, yet no one ever rushed to sponsor me. With a vicious look on his face, Shen Renke grabbed Qiao Yan's hand. As he fled the auction hall, he threw one last line at me. Shu Han Yu, even if you knelt down and begged me for the rest of your life, I would never return to your villa again. The lovesick male supporting lead disappeared completely from my world, taking the female lead with him. With me no longer standing in their way, I figured Shen Renke should finally be living the life he'd always dreamed of. Smooth sailing, just as he wished. On the third day after buying the land, I walked into a high-end clothing boutique at the mall and gently brushed my fingers over the newest collection. That soft fabric really did seem capable of smoothing out the anxiety in my chest. Suddenly, the system inside my head let out a discreet sigh. I replied tactfully, "What's wrong? I haven't gone crazy these past few days. Has that finally put you in the mood to start sighing?" The lovesick male supporting lead is living a bit miserably right now, it said, thoughtfully pulling up Shen Renke's recent situation for me to see. After leaving the villa, Shen Renke counted the pitiful amount of money he had left and rented a tiny one-bedroom apartment in the city's slums. In the sweltering summer heat, the place felt like a steaming cage. Yet he acted like a victorious general, holding the female lead tenderly in his arms, sweat pouring down as he spoke with deep affection. "Yan Yan, give me a little more time. I'll definitely give you a good life. I'm just short on startup capital right now. Once I scrape together some money, I'll succeed." Out of his sight, Qiao Yan's face was full of disgust at the cramped environment. Though she came from an ordinary background, she had once experienced a grand, dramatic romance with the male lead, living in the most luxurious villa, dining at the most expensive restaurants, staying in hotels that cost hundreds of thousands a night. She hardly looked like someone who would willingly follow him back to the slums. A woman once cherished by a lion would never see a hyena as anything more than a flavouring, just something to take the edge off boredom. The system tentatively spoke up. "Maybe we could save him just a little. After all, I still have KPI targets. If the host doesn't complete the mission, my personal completion rate will drop." At that moment, I was standing in the fitting room, holding a long silk scarf. Hearing that, I decisively wrapped it around my neck, rolled my eyes and rasped, "Go on. Say that again if you dare. I'm listening. Believe it or not, I can unalive myself right here just to spice things up." The system burst into tears, calling out desperately, "Host, can we please sit down and talk calmly like civilized beings?" I let go of the scarf, my tone shifting. "But you're right about one thing. The male supporting lead really is living pretty miserably. After all, in Harbour City, every inch of land is worth gold. Even a pigeon cage apartment in the slums costs a fortune." The system immediately perked up, practically dancing with excitement. "So you're starting to want to save the male supporting lead?" I pulled out my phone and looked up Shen Renke on WeChat. He'd been gone from the villa for several days, yet he still hadn't deleted my contact. His profile picture refreshed 3 times a day in moments, every post flaunting his so-called happiness in love. The last line on his WeChat was still that grand declaration, that he would definitely give the woman he loved a happy life. I sent a single message. Shen Renke. Almost instantly the screen showed typing. He was probably deleting and rewriting again and again. After a long while, he finally sent, "Shu Han Yu, you're only contacting me now. Don't you think that's a little too late?" Too late? Debt collection is never late. I frowned slightly and replied, "Not late at all. The money I transferred to you over the past year, plus the rent for staying at my place, I've already had a lawyer compile everything and sent it to your email. Remember to repay it on time." The other side suddenly went silent. Even the typing indicator disappeared. I waited a long time, but no reply ever came. Back then, Shenrenki thought giving him money was an insult. Now I wanted that insult back. And yet he clutched it tightly, refusing to return even a single cent. Seeing that he still wasn't replying, I deliberately forwarded Mrs. Liu, the nanny's WeChat contact, to him. "Mrs. Liu likes you a lot. She treats you like a son. I've fired her now. If you need a nanny, feel free to contact her. Monthly salary is 8,000 yuans, room and board included, triple pay on holidays. Don't forget." Still no response. I held up my phone for the system to see. See? It's not that I didn't try to save him, he's the one who doesn't care. This time, the system fell completely silent. The auction paperwork for the land was approved quickly, and the new project kicked off amid much fanfare. To attract some investment, I deliberately went to find the biggest antagonist in the book. At first, the system tried to stop me. "Host? That's the antagonist. The man who can make Harbour City shake just by stamping his foot," I argued back. If I didn't look for someone who could shake Harbour City to invest, was I supposed to look for someone who could shake the ground floor of a slum building instead and throw money at them? The meeting went very smoothly. Under this skin of mine lived a Zhao Di, who was utterly clueless about investing in business. The only reason I knew anything at all was because, before transmigrating, my rich girl roommate had once absent-mindedly lectured me non-stop. She said the most important thing in business was conceding profit. Only when people gained something would they be willing to keep cooperating. She didn't just support me through college, she also taught me plenty of hard-edged practical lessons. Even my driver's license came from her. She thought learning to drive was exhausting, so during summer break she dragged me along for company and paid the enrolment fee for me as well. After agonising over those two words, conceding profit, I decisively changed the pre-arranged 4-6 profit split to 3-7. Once the contract was signed, I was in high spirits and ordered several bottles of expensive red wine. I hadn't expected the private room door to be pushed open just then, and the person carrying the wine in was Shenrenki. I hadn't seen him in over a month. He was noticeably thinner than before, and much more haggard. Back in school, he'd been a poor but proud campus heartthrob with a trace of melancholy. Now, his body was coated in dust and fatigue, and the clarity and ease in his eyes were gone. This was the largest bar in the entire city. Handsome young men carrying drinks moved back and forth everywhere. Blended among them, Shenrenki was completely unremarkable. Carrying a tray of alcohol, he looked up and froze when he realised that inside the luxurious private room there were only me and another unfamiliar man. For a brief moment, disbelief flashed across his face. Then, once he recovered, he strode forward and grabbed my wrist, his expression dark. "Xu Han Yu. Who is he? Why are the two of you here alone?" I lifted my leg and kicked him, breaking free from his grip. "I'm discussing business with someone. Do I need to report it to you? What, are you my father?" Shenrenki's face shifted between pale and livid. He stared at me for a long time before finally letting out a slow breath, as if laying down his weapons in surrender, or as if the tension he'd carried for so long had finally eased. He spoke slowly. "Han Yu, you win. You knew I worked here, so you deliberately brought someone else to provoke me, didn't you? For over a month you intentionally didn't contact me. Wasn't that just to make me see clearly who I truly love? Just as you wanted, I can no longer deny it. I love you now, more than Yan Yan." He closed his eyes, as if severing ties with the past for the final time, or reluctantly stepping into a new life. "Han Yu, I'll return to your side. I also promise I'll have no more private contact with Yan Yan. But I have one condition. You must give me the land first. Then we'll set some rules. First, you withdraw the debt list you sent me." "What?" I sharply caught the scent of money about to be torn away and cut him off in shock. "You want the land? Fine. You want my money too? Fine. But now you want to repay kindness with resentment and make me compensate you on top of that? Are you cursed or something? Every time I get involved with you, it's nothing but financial ruin." In this book, I poured more than half of my heart and effort into elevating Shenrenki into one of Harbour City's new elites. The very first thing he did after securing his footing was acquire the Shu family's company, then kick my family out of the board of directors. He even joined forces with several other companies to strangle the new business my parents had painstakingly rebuilt, cutting it off at the source. From that point on, the Shu family never had a chance to recover. My parents soon followed, dying in quiet despair. The way men and women think is truly different. When men love women, they toss them some money and keep them sheltered, like raising a bird or a cat. They never cultivate a woman's ability to earn and stand on her own. All a woman can receive is a bit of money, and her only choice is to make herself look beautiful for men to admire. Every cent spent on her ultimately circles back to serving men. Women are different. When women love men, they pull them into the world of making money, patiently guiding them step by step, teaching them how to stand firm. Then they watch the man grow bigger and stronger, sometimes even surpassing them, until his true nature emerges, and he turns around to chase after someone younger. The woman herself becomes yesterday's wilted flower, discarded. I was once poor to the point of cruelty. That's why I value money more than life itself. No one should even think about reaching into my pocket. Shen Renke, how clear do you need me to be? I don't love you anymore. Can you get out of my sight and disappear from my life forever? Standing so close, I could clearly see Shen Renke's lips trembling slightly. He still couldn't believe that I could suddenly stop loving him. My past love had been too intense, so intense that he'd been completely wrapped in it, firmly believing it would never disappear. That's impossible, he said, staring straight into my utterly calm eyes. How could you stop loving me? Han Yu, you're just angry with me, right? I was just too poor, too insecure to believe a rich young lady would really like me. That's why I kept pushing your limits again and again, trying to prove that your love for me wouldn't change. Now I'm sure you really do love me. So let's stop fighting. Let's go back to how things were before, all right? He was pleading, fragments of light trembling in his eyes. But love is a luxury, something only the truly wealthy can afford to give. I had only transmigrated for a month, suddenly rich overnight. I couldn't afford a luxury like love. Asking me for it was doomed to be futile. The one who could give him that love had already disappeared. He stared straight into my eyes, trying to find the love that used to be there. But after searching for a long time, he found nothing, not even a trace. Only unfamiliarity and wariness remained. If he hadn't appeared in front of me on his own, I might have already forgotten what the lovesick male supporting character in this book even looked like. You're right, I said calmly. How could a rich young lady like me possibly like someone with nothing at all like you? You've already proven that, so can you get lost now? Shen Renke panicked. It was the first time I had ever seen fear on his face. Life over the past month in the slums hadn't been easy. Just to scrape by, he'd even had to work in places like this, crowded, filthy, crawling with all kinds of people. He forced a smile as if trying to convince himself. No, that can't be. You loved me so much. How could you suddenly stop loving me? He grabbed my wrist, trying to drag me outside. Han Yu, let's talk somewhere private. Come out with me. His grip was strong, exactly like my father's hands, rough from years of farm labour. The day I was tricked into coming home over the marriage issue, I'd argued with my father for hours. In the end, he'd grabbed my arm just like this and dragged me into the room. Xu Jiaodi, come out here with me. Don't think going to college makes you special. I'm telling you, you're getting married whether you want to or not. The scene overlapped perfectly with the present. No one noticed my eyes suddenly turning bloodshot, as if something had invaded my brain. I screamed, grabbed a wine bottle from nearby, and smashed it viciously over Shen Renke's head. Bang! He clutched his head in pain, shock and terror frozen on his face. Utter disbelief that someone who had loved him so deeply could strike him without hesitation. Glass shards scattered across the floor. The main antagonist abruptly curled up in the corner of the sofa, clutching his head with wide, panicked eyes, shouting, "Change the profit split to 40-60! No, 50-50, 50-50! You hit him already, then don't hit me!" Fine. A gentleman keeps his word, I said, immediately ordering my secretary to redraw the contract. Hello, Xiaodong. Print the new contract now. Change the profit split to 50-50. Hurry up, or you really will be attending my funeral next week. Amid the chaos, the system burst into tears and clung to me. Host, I was wrong. Please see the therapist right now. I swear I'll never let someone as emotionally unstable as you go save a male supporting character ever again. I sat across from the psychologist once again and handed over the stack of completed questionnaires. He ran a hand through the few remaining strands of hair on the top of his head. After staring at the papers so hard they were nearly burned through, he cautiously asked, "Miss Chu, this time, what do you think was the root cause of losing control of your emotions?" I leaned back in my chair, arms crossed. "Situational reenactment. It triggered bad memories. Those pains felt like they were gnawing straight into my bones. I couldn't break free." The psychologist seemed to have found a breakthrough. His tone noticeably lightened. "Really? Could you tell me what you were doing at the time?" "Signing a contract. A piece of land that cost 300 million. The profit split was clearly stated, 30 for me, 70 for him, but he insisted on 50-50. By calculation, the partner had already yielded at least 200 million in profit." The last remaining hairs on the psychologist's head were practically rubbed away. He vigorously wiped his face, took a deep breath, and delivered his conclusion, one he clearly didn't fully believe himself. "Based on the test results, it appears you experienced traumatic memory reactivation. Perhaps you could try reducing exposure to similar scenarios. For example, making a conscious effort to reduce opportunities to earn 200 million. There was zero confidence in his voice. I didn't want to agree, but the first part at least sounded reasonable. Reduce reenactment of similar situations. I pulled up the debt statement I'd sent to Shen Renke and added a new item, medical expenses. The wine bottle smashing his head had broken. Compensation was required. I frowned and asked, "System, how much compensation is required?" "That depends on the severity of the injury. Minor injuries usually cost around 20,000. Severe ones can reach several 100,000. Since the lovesick male supporting character is still alive, the injury likely isn't serious." I generously deleted the 20,000 yuan, then sent him the remaining invoice, just under 10 million, along with my reminder and bank account details. Before Shen Renke could call, I hung up immediately and blocked him. After finishing all that, I finally let out a long breath. Then Li Lan called. "Han Yu, want to go shopping? I've dug up some juicy gossip about Shen Heartthrob over here." Her voice carried unmistakable schadenfreude. At the luxury boutique, as I tried on the latest handbag to match an outfit, she teased, "He couldn't scrape together enough money to repay his debt, so he tried to get Xiao Yan to sell her luxury bags and jewellery. They ended up having a huge fight, and she packed everything up and ran straight back to reconcile with her ex-boyfriend." In this book, after countless twists and turns, the male and female leads eventually found their way back to each other, continuing their melodrama of love and hate between a domineering tycoon from a wealthy family and a pure white lotus from the slums. As for me, the one who had always bankrolled the lovesick male supporting character, I had completely drawn a clear line and returned to being a wealthy young heiress. Everything went back to the starting point, except Shen Renke was left standing alone at the end. The person he loved and the person who loved him both slipped through his fingers. He held on to no one. Back in school, Shen Renke had fallen for Xiao Yan at first sight, for a reason so simple it was laughable. Broke and desperate, he stood in the cafeteria holding a lunch tray, only to realise there wasn't even enough money left on his card for a basic meal. When the female lead saw him, she generously swiped her own card, and from that moment on, love sprouted like fertiliser on barren land. Later on, even the 10 million I spent on Shen Renke couldn't compare to the 20 yuan's worth of fertiliser the female lead had given him in the beginning. I hated it. Hated that I hadn't taken that money to buy handbags instead, but handed it to him. He didn't deserve 10 million. He only deserved to hold that 20 yuan cafeteria meal. After all those long years of savouring that cheap meal seasoned with love. I thought I would never cross paths with Shen Renke again. But on the drive back to the villa after parting ways with Li Lan, I unexpectedly spotted a thin, worn-down figure squatting outside the gate. He seemed to have been waiting for a long time. After rummaging through my memories, I barely recognised him. It was the once arrogant, deeply infatuated male supporting character. When he saw my car, a flicker of light appeared in Shen Renke's eyes. He cautiously called out, Hanyu, you blocked all my contact methods. I really had no other choice, so I waited here for you to come back. Gone was his former smug confidence. A faint scar still marked his forehead, and the wear of life had etched clear traces of hardship into his face. I remembered the therapist's advice, to reduce reenactments of similar situations. And yet, Shen Renke had an uncanny ability to trigger my worst memories. Instinctively, I tried to walk past him toward the villa. Shen Renke panicked. He started to reach out to grab my arm, then suddenly remembered how viciously he'd been struck by a bottle half a month earlier. His hand recoiled, and instead he stepped in front of me. Hanyu, I know I did many things wrong in the past. I also blame myself for never understanding my own heart. Your family background was too good. I always felt unworthy of you. That's why I kept testing your love for me. He spoke with raw sincerity. Tears even shimmered in his eyes. I took a step back, frowning. To him, this relationship was like a sheet of glass, one he kept piling weight onto, again and again, testing its strength. The glass finally shattered. After getting the answer he wanted, he still wasn't satisfied and insisted on piecing it back together. But you didn't pass my test, I said, so this ends here. The system made one last feeble struggle. Maybe. Shut up. Stop dumping the female lead's leftovers on me. Is this place a recycling station? The system actually shut up. A layer of shock spread across Shen Renke's face. He couldn't believe love could be taken back, much less that someone who once loved him so deeply now held no trace of affection in her eyes. For a long time, he had maintained a delicate balance, demanding money from me while offering love to Qiaoyan. He desperately wanted to hold on to both sides, but in the end it was nothing but building castles in the sand. I walked past him toward the villa. Suddenly, Shen Renke dropped to his knees in front of me. A thin trail of tears slid down his face, his voice hoarse. Hanyu, you must be lying to me. How could you not love me anymore? You loved me so much before. How could it disappear overnight? What if I kneel and apologize? What if I beg properly? Can we go back to how things were? He knelt on the ground, crying so hard he didn't see my eyes growing redder and redder. The day I turned the gas valve, my mother had knelt just like this, using the familiar weapon of filial piety to bind me. Zhaodi, I raised you this big. Why won't you think about this family? You're already 24. Girls your age in the village married long ago. You're always so selfish, only thinking about yourself. I'll kneel to you. I'll kowtow to you. Get married and exchange the bride price for your brother. She slammed her head into the ground again and again, as if that alone could turn me into an unforgivable sinner. Soft clay to be moulded under moral pressure. Now Shen Renke knelt in front of me, perfectly overlapping with my mother's aged silhouette. Compared to my father and brother, I hated my mother even more. I hated her weakness. I hated that after suffering so much, she dragged me onto the same old road. I hated that she used illness as an excuse to trick me into coming home. A victim who had endured endless exploitation, only to become an accomplice helping evil thrive. The red haze in my vision thickened. Past and present collided. Reason was swallowed whole. I grabbed Shen Renke by the hair and slammed his head down violently, screaming curses as I did. So you like kneeling so much? Then kneel enough today. Even if you kneel yourself to death, I will never let myself be arranged like that. I will never trade my life for an outrageous bride price for someone else. I will never become blood-soaked nourishment for relatives who drain others dry. By the end, I no longer knew who I was yelling at. Only when the butler dragged my hysterical self into the villa did I regain a fraction of clarity. I turned back and looked at Shen Renke, unconscious on the ground. That was fine. From the despair in his eyes, I knew he had finally understood the truth completely. Not only did I no longer love him, I hated him to the point of wanting him gone. The psychologist came for the third time. He was completely bald now. This time, he didn't ask me to fill out any questionnaires. He said those were useless. With nothing left to lose, he went straight to the point. Miss Xu, every time you lose control, who is present? I thought carefully. Shen Renke. He's there every time. The psychologist slammed the table. That's the root of the problem. That walking bad luck charm. Avoid him at all costs. Detour whenever you see him. Keep a distance of at least 100 feet. I guarantee this will never happen again. A miracle doctor reborn, diagnosing the illness instantly. I finally understood. After thanking the psychologist profusely, I engraved his words into my heart. My future would absolutely not allow that lovesick male supporting character to appear again. Construction on the land I bought began in full swing. What puzzled me was that the biggest villain in the book always brought 2 bodyguards whenever he met me, and kept at least 10 feet away, never daring to approach. According to the book, he was supposed to be a cold, ruthless tycoon with sharp, lucid eyes. Reality didn't quite match the description. He seemed to regret agreeing to a 50-50 profit split, which made sense. After I spent $300 million to buy the land, I had no startup capital left. He invested a full $400 million, yet held the same shares as I did. No wonder he regretted it. At that moment, I realised I was the real villain of this story. I often visited the construction site to check on progress. After failing to catch me outside my villa, Shen Renke spent a long time tracking down my whereabouts, and then began squatting outside the construction site as well. I treated the psychologist's words like sacred scripture and hired bodyguards. The moment Shen Renke appeared in the distance, I ordered them to drive him away. From far off, I could hear the lovesick male supporting character shouting, "Han Yu, I just want to say one thing. Just 1 minute of your time." I curled my lip in disgust. $700 million had already been poured into this project. Where was I supposed to find a spare minute to chat with this walking jinx? Li Lan rolled her eyes at him disdainfully. What? Isn't this all about money? Live too long in a pigeonhole apartment, and you start missing the comfortable days back at the villa. When Shen Renke first left the villa, he had also thought about starting a business. But once the bosses he'd once been friendly with learned that he had fallen out with me, they all chose to ignore him. The connections he'd once been proud of were completely severed. He ran around with unfinished software until his legs nearly gave out, yet not a single person was willing to take a look. Gone was any trace of his former ambition. My lawyer chased after him, demanding $9.98 million. The extra $20,000 had already been deducted by me as medical compensation for smashing his head. I'm meticulous when it comes to money. I never take advantage of others, but no one should expect to take a single cent from me either. Shen Renke still had no money. Left with no choice, he sued the female lead, forcing her to return the gifts he had given her. From that point on, the lovesick male supporting character and the female lead completely turned against each other. Without the evil female supporting character, me, standing between them, the two actually ended up confronting each other in court. Nothing remained of their former love. After the fallout, Qiao Yan contentedly became the male lead's little canary, never again mentioning ambitions of becoming the official wife. I didn't care about any of that. I only cared that my $998 million had finally come back. On the day the shopping mall was completed, the system, silent for a long time, suddenly cheered in my ear. "Host, I have to go now." The little conscience I have left stirred for once. "Sorry for not helping you complete the task and hurting your KPI." "Host, my mission is complete." Cheers echoed inside my head. Only then did I understand. The system's task had been to redeem the lovesick male supporting character, to free him from his gloomy obsession. I had done it. The male supporting character no longer had even a trace of gloomy obsession left, only the ravages of life and an empty wallet. He had no time to brood, because his delivery order was about to time out. He had no time to obsess, because a bad review was looming. Perfect. I praised myself quietly. I had successfully redeemed a dark soul. When the second round of investment funds came in, I donated to several elementary schools and helped girls from mountainous regions return to school. It had been a long time since I last lost control of my emotions. The nightmares from before transmigrating slowly faded away. On the day the mall officially opened, I smoothly received my first commission. It also happened to coincide with moving into a new home and my 26th birthday. Li Lan, the villain, and I gathered together in the brand new house. While we were chatting, the food Li Lan had ordered online was delivered. The door opened. Without warning, Shen Renke appeared, carrying heavy bags of food, habitually handing them over like he used to. He was just about to speak when he looked up and saw me sitting upright in the centre of the sofa. He froze. Clearly, it had only been 2 years since we last met, yet it felt like a lifetime apart. He stared at me, panic flickering in his eyes, then spoke hoarsely. Han Yu, I had a dream. I dreamed that you helped me start a company, raised me to become one of Harbour City's new elites. But because of my foolish pride when I was young, I thought you were humiliating me with money. So I repaid kindness with resentment. I ruined the Shu family and caused your death. By the end of his sentence, his voice was trembling. Perhaps he had dreamed of the original plot, of a lifetime of glory, only to wake and realise it had all been nothing more than a fleeting illusion. In the spacious living room, the 4 of us stood there, each with our own thoughts. I met his anguished gaze calmly, distant, indifferent, without a ripple. Li Lan stood beside me, furious, eyes wide with anger. Shen Renke, his edges nearly worn away by reality, still looked at me with desperate hope, as if waiting for a miracle, waiting for me to turn back, waiting for me to pull him out of the mud once more and love him like before. Only the book's greatest villain was curled up on the sofa, clutching his head and shouting, "What are you all standing there for? Close the door already!" This woman surnamed Shu goes crazy every time she sees him. If the door isn't shut, you really will be attending my funeral next week. The door slammed shut. One door separated us into 2 worlds, the world Shenrenka had once despised, once abandoned. This lifetime, he would never be able to step into it again. Thank you for tuning into Short Fiction Lab. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe to support our channel. See you again in the next story.